Now we have our rough animation created, and it's time to actually polish things up by adding some final graphics and some effects into our scene. So let's start by actually resetting our workspace. If your workspace doesn't look like this, go up under the workspace and make sure you reset the standard workspace. And click yes to reset it to its original layout. Now your workspace should look like this. Also, let's go ahead and preview our animation. Click the left button in the preview panel to move it to the first frame in your timeline, and then load up a RAM preview. It may take a second on your system, so just let the frames go ahead and load in. And once they're all loaded in, we'll go ahead and preview our animation. So I can already tell I need to add a fade or some type of transition to those swoop lines. And then we need to actually fade out the graphics. So I'm going to press the spacebar to stop playback here. We'll start by adding a transition to our swoop lines. So let's go ahead and scroll down to layer 9. That's the swoop lines layer, and I'm going to enable solo for this layer just so we can focus only on this layer. Let's press I to move to the end point of the layer and then go up to Effect. Under Effects, let's go to Transition. I want to choose a linear wipe. So we'll choose linear wipe, and in order to preview the animation, just click and drag on the transition completion to scrub through. And you can definitely have these lines look like they're drawing into the scene. Right now I want them to be off the screen and then draw in the opposite way. So let's go ahead and change the wipe angle to a value of 270. As you start to drag up to this left side, if you hold down Shift, it'll snap in 45-degree increments. So it'll snap right to 270. So let's change our transition completion to 100% and add a keyframe here in the Effects Controls panel. Now let's move down to about 3 seconds in the timeline and then change our transition completion to 100%. Now as I scrub through, I can see the edge of this is very harsh. So I want to feather this a little bit, so I'll just go ahead and click and drag on the feather parameter and set it to about 45 pixels. So now these are going to go ahead and animate across the page. Let's turn off solo, and now we can scrub through and see how these are going to swoop into the scene. I think that looks pretty cool. Now let's add our fade out for our other graphic elements here. Let's start at about 7 seconds. I want to add a fade to my circles, so let's select the circles here. Now to add a keyframe for the opacity at this point, I want it to be the current value that I have for opacity right now. But if I click the keyframe button, this will actually delete all of my keyframes, which I don't want to do. So let me undo that. To create a keyframe that's the same value as the pre-existing keyframe, you want to go down here to your navigation buttons and the button in between. If you click it, that'll go ahead and add a keyframe at the current value for that specific parameter. Let's scroll up through the layers and see which other layers don't have fade out. And as you can see, training and the plus symbol don't have fade outs. So let's select the plus symbol and our training layer and just press T, not once but twice. Now we'll go ahead and click that keyframe button here to add 2 keyframes there. And then just press O to move to the out point of those layers. And we can just add another keyframe at 0 to add the fade out, and we'll scroll back down to our circle layer and have those fade out as well. Now let's say we don't want our swoop lines to disappear. Let's go ahead and just click on the right side of the swoop lines layer and just drag it to the end of our composition. Now we scroll through, you can see our graphics are going to fade out, everything except for the swoop lines. So now we're actually set to add a graphic element. We're going to add our next section. The next section is just going to be called Warm Up, and I want a circle to appear behind the words Warm Up. So what I'm going to do is scroll up in my timeline here and just select my plus layer. This is the layer just below my H plus sport layer. Now to add text in the scene, all we have to do is grab our type tool. But when we do that, notice these panels will automatically open. Since I want to be able to actually set some type, I'm going to change my workspace. So let's go to the workspace pull down and change it from standard to text. Now with my text selected, let's just go ahead and click right about here to start my text. So let's type warm-ups. And here I'll go back. I'm just using my arrow key to move back. and I'll press delete to delete the space and just add a dash in here. To set your text, grab your selection tool, and now we've added text into the scene. With the selection tool selected, let's just move warm-ups down a little bit. And now I want to add a graphic element underneath my text, but if you notice when I added my text layer, it automatically made that text start at the beginning of the timeline. So let's click on the left edge of the text and drag it to the right and hold down Shift to make it snap to my current time indicator. So we'll just have a simple fade on this text. We'll add the fade in here in just a second. Let's add our graphic element. To add a graphic, I want to make sure that none of my layers are selected. So I'm just going to click in any of these grey areas here. Now with nothing selected, I can go up to my shape tools and I'm going to click and hold on the rectangle tool. So that'll open up the ellipse tool. Now with my ellipse tool selected, see I have a fill and a stroke. Well, let's say I want the fill to be more of this kind of bluish turquoise colour in the background. I can go ahead and click on that fill and grab my little eyedropper here and just sample any of these colours. Now that's a little dark, so I'm just going to brighten it up a bit and click OK. We'll leave the white stroke on there for now. And then just click and drag in the project and drag it over top of the text. Perfect. Now notice when I created the shape, it automatically put it at the top of the layer hierarchy. So what I'm going to do is just click on the shape layer and move it down below my text layer. And you guessed it, we're going to trim the start point of this layer just by clicking on the left and dragging it back to my current time indicator. So let's go ahead and make sure we have the selection tool active, and then we can just reposition our shape accordingly. So now we're just going to add a quick fade to this to have them fade into the scene. I'm just going to move a little bit down the timeline just by clicking up in this area here. I'm going to move to about frame 812, and I'll select both layers 2 and 3 and press Option T or Alt T on Windows to automatically add a keyframe for opacity. So now I can press I to move to the endpoints of those layers and just change the opacity setting to 0. Since I had both layers selected, it automatically added the fade to both layers. So now the only thing that I'm noticing that I want to adjust is how this background graphic element is blending with the background. I'm going to go ahead and select my shape layer here, and if you don't have your nodes up, go ahead and toggle your switches and modes till you're in nodes, and let's change the blend mode. I want to choose soft light. Now when I deselect that layer, you can see here's my graphic, and it's blended into the background using the soft light blend mode. And this is pretty much exactly what I wanted to create. To preview our animation, just move back to the first frame and then load up a RAM preview. Once your preview is loaded, then it'll go ahead and play in real time. And you can see we successfully completed our animation and added graphics into the scene.